Despite numerous setbacks, the desire for Egyptian self-rule never completely faded. When the Hyksos forces withdrew from Upper Egypt and retreated to their stronghold in the Delta, it presented the Thebans with a faint but vital opportunity, a chance to rebuild and reorganize. Rahotep, the new ruler of Thebes and the first pharaoh of the 17th Dynasty, took immediate steps to revive what had been lost. He initiated restoration efforts at sacred sites damaged by the Hyksos invasions. At Jebtu, he ordered the repair of the Temple of Min, lamenting that its gates and doors had fallen into ruin. Meanwhile, the religious center at Abydos saw the revival of the Osiris-Khenti-Amensu cult. These actions were not just about preserving ancient structures. By restoring temples and re-establishing traditional rites, Rahotep made it clear that he intended to rule as a legitimate Egyptian king, fulfilling the sacred duties expected of pharaohs. Rahotep's successors continued his mission. They repaired and expanded temples at Abydos and Jebtu, both historically significant cities during Egypt's earlier civil conflicts. However, the revival wasn't limited to religion. These locations also served as strategic points in military planning. Garrisons were stationed there, transforming them into advanced positions in preparation for renewed conflict with the Hyksos. Slowly, Thebes was laying the foundations for a political and military comeback. The kings who followed Rahotep also worked to revive another important royal tradition, pyramid construction. The modest rock-cut burial shafts of Neferhotep III and others had fallen far short of former royal standards. But the rulers of the 17th Dynasty aspired to restore the grandeur of the Middle Kingdom. On the steep slope of Diyar Abu el-Naga, in western Thebes, they established a new royal cemetery. Among the tombs, that of Nubkhepra-Intef, the dynasty's fourth king, stands out. His burial chamber was carved directly into the cliff, accessible by a descending shaft. But above ground, there was also a visible symbol of royal power. Though enclosed by a rather poorly built brick retaining wall, the pyramid itself was fashioned from mud bricks. The early Theban rulers lacked the resources to quarry large amounts of stone, so they settled for a more modest solution. The structure was plastered and whitewashed to imitate the appearance of a stone pyramid with smooth casing. At just 43 feet tall, Intef's pyramid could hardly compare to the towering monuments of the 12th dynasty. Nevertheless, the ambition was unmistakable, even if the means were limited. Similarly, Intef used a recycled statue reflecting the dynasty's resourcefulness during this period of revival. Although Nubkhepra-Intef may not have possessed the wealth or resources of a great ruler, his determination was unmistakable. At his tomb, he erected obelisks that carried a bold and meaningful message. Through finely carved hieroglyphs, he linked himself with some of Egypt's most revered deities, Osiris-Khenti-Amensu, the god of Abydos and guardian of resurrection and the afterlife, Anubis, the jackal-headed god who oversaw embalming and burial rites, and somewhat unexpectedly, Sopdu, the lord of foreign lands. Sopdu's presence might seem out of place among these funerary gods, but it was far from accidental. Though a relatively minor deity, Sopdu held important roles. He was considered the protector of foreign regions, particularly the rugged areas of Sinai and southern Palestine. His primary temple stood in Persopdu, right within the heart of the Hyksos-controlled eastern delta. This was a calculated religious maneuver. Just as the Hyksos king Kion had adopted the favor of Theban gods to legitimize his rule, Intef responded in kind by invoking a god rooted in Hyksos territory. By aligning himself with Sopdu, the Theban kings sought divine backing in the political struggle to reclaim territories lost to the foreign rulers. However, divine favor alone would not be enough. For Nubkhepra-Intef to rally support against the Hyksos, he first needed to strengthen his dynasty's position in Thebes. Unity was essential. Any internal division could prove disastrous. A vivid example of this internal consolidation survives in a royal decree issued at Jebtu. This document records the kings settling a dispute within the powerful priestly administration of the Temple of Min. Though the specifics of the conflict remain unknown, the king's ruling against an official named Minhotep was harsh and definitive. "Remove him from the temple of my father, Min, expel him from his office, now and for all future generations. Cast him down, and strip him of his provisions, so that his name is no longer remembered in this temple. It's likely that Menhotep's offense wasn't against the temple itself, but against supporters loyal to Intef's regime. This suspicion is reinforced by the identity of the man who benefited from Menhotep's removal, Mimhat, the mayor of Jebtu and a steadfast ally of the 17th Dynasty. Through such decisive actions, the Theban rulers gradually tightened their control over Upper Egypt, placing authority in the hands of those they could trust completely. The result was a tightly unified administration, eager to relearn and re-establish traditional systems of governance. Nubkepra Intef's successor, Sobkamsaf II, around 1560 BC, demonstrated his commitment to this restoration effort by organizing a quarrying expedition to Wadi Hammamat. This marked the first state-backed mission of its kind in over 160 years. While the expedition involved just 130 men and may have been assembled somewhat hastily, it was nonetheless a significant beginning. Further east, in the mineral-rich region of Gebel Zait, mining operations resumed with the help of mercenaries recruited from the Medjay, a desert-dwelling people. These efforts not only sourced materials to revive royal workshops but also served as a sign that the Theban regime was expanding its reach, testing its strength, and preparing itself for future conflict. The clearest indication yet of looming military plans came when Sobkamsaf granted a land donation to the temple at Madu, modern Medamud, located just outside Thebes. This choice was deliberate. The deity honored at Madu was Montu, the Theban war god who had once inspired the 11th dynasty in its campaign to reunify Egypt 6 centuries earlier. It was perhaps hoped that Montu's favor would again guide a new generation of Theban warriors in their quest for national redemption. Just as momentum was building, the 17th dynasty was struck by a sudden and devastating setback. From the remote regions of Nubia, a powerful army raised by the king of Kush advanced northward, passing through the Egyptian-built fortresses of Wawat. Their forces swept through Upper Egypt, attacking towns, looting temples, desecrating tombs, and plundering whatever they could seize. What made the invasion especially dangerous was that the Kushite forces had not come alone. The tribes of Wawat had been stirred to action, joined by other groups from Upper Nubia, the distant land of Punt, and the Medjay of the eastern desert, well known for offering their military skills to the highest bidder. This coalition posed a serious threat, uniting former subjugated peoples eager to strike back against Egyptian dominance. The town of Nekheb found itself at the heart of the conflict. Its residents, under the determined leadership of their local governor, mounted a fierce defense. They ultimately drove the attackers back beyond the first cataract. Still, the cost was steep. The governor lost personal property to the invaders, and the Theban forces suffered losses they could scarcely afford. This Kushite incursion came as a harsh surprise to the Theban leadership, but it delivered a critical lesson. Before they could pursue their campaign to reunify Egypt, they would first have to stabilize and defend their vulnerable southern frontier. In the Hyksos capital of Haweret, King Apipi likely sensed that open conflict was on the horizon. Taking no chances, he reinforced the defensive walls surrounding the royal citadel, and forged a strategic alliance with the kingdom of Kush. Utilizing desert routes through the oases, he could communicate with the Kushite ruler without needing to pass through Theban-controlled areas. Apipi may have had to offer a share of the spoils to secure Kushite cooperation, but dividing Egypt between their two powers seemed a worthwhile price if it meant permanently ending native Egyptian sovereignty. Ironically, Apipi drew from an old Egyptian tactic to rally his people, a flood of propaganda. He boasted new, increasingly elaborate titles to emphasize his strength and legitimacy, declaring himself resolute in battle, bearing a greater name than any other king, guardian of distant lands unseen by his enemies. His ultimate claim was bold and unequivocal: there is none like him in any land. Unshaken by Apipi's rhetoric, the Theban king Seqenenra Taa responded not with words, but with action. Rather than trading declarations, he laid the groundwork for real battle. His first move was to establish a military headquarters from which to plan the offensive against Memphis and Hutweret. The site he chose was Deir el-Balas, on the Nile's west bank across from Jebtu. There he constructed a fortified palace for the royal household, supported by a large settlement and bakery complex for his entourage. A lookout post atop a nearby hill provided a sweeping view of the Nile Valley. With his command center in place, Seqenenra Taa initiated the first phase of the offensive against Hyksos forces. And he was no passive commander. Tall and powerfully built, with a large head crowned by thick, curly black hair, he cut the image of a warrior king. Inspired by his own sense of destiny, and strengthened by the fierce loyalty of his sister wife, Rahotep, he engaged the enemy directly in battle. Then tragedy struck. During the heat of combat, Taa was fatally wounded. Without protection, he was overwhelmed by attackers wielding axes, spears, and daggers. A blow from an Asiatic axe crushed his skull, killing him instantly. Amid the confusion, there was no time for proper burial preparations. His body was hurriedly embalmed and returned to Thebes. There, in front of a mourning royal family and a stunned citizenry, Taa the Brave, as inscribed on his coffin, was buried. His successor, Kamose, led the funeral procession. Seqenenra Taa had fallen in his prime, after a reign of barely 4 years. Now, the responsibility for Egypt's future rested on Kamose. Young and uncertain of his next steps, the new ruler convened a war council. With emotion and frustration, he voiced the gravity of the nation's plight. Why do I sit idle while one prince rules in Hutweret and another in Kush? I am forced to share Egypt with an Asiatic and a Nubian, each claiming a portion of my land. Never in the 14 centuries since the founding of Egypt's statehood had the country faced such humiliation. While periods of unrest and division had come before, this situation was unparalleled. With foreign rulers occupying both the northern and southern regions, the very survival of Egypt as an independent nation governed by Egyptians hung in the balance. Restoring the two lands would demand continued sacrifice, perseverance, and an unwavering determination to overcome all odds. The liberation of Egypt from Hyksos domination would come to be remembered by future generations as a defining moment of national revival. The monarchs who led the charge for independence would later be honored alongside legendary figures like Menes, the first pharaoh, and Mentuhotep, who reunited Egypt after a long civil war. Egyptologists share this perspective, viewing the removal of the Hyksos as the event that ushered in the New Kingdom, the most illustrious period in Egypt's ancient history. Yet, for those living through it, the experience was far less triumphant. Kamose's lament about the state of his realm was filled with genuine frustration. By 1541 BC, Egypt occupied only a fraction of the territory once ruled by the mighty kings of the 12th dynasty. For many Egyptians, even those in the Theban stronghold, the existing arrangement didn't seem entirely unfavorable. Cooperation with the Hyksos regime at Hutweret brought tangible benefits. The Thebans were allowed to farm and graze animals on land under Hyksos authority, and in return for paying taxes, they even received fodder and other provisions. Kamose's own officials reportedly told him they were content with this arrangement. While this could have been part of a propagandistic narrative crafted to highlight the king's courage in contrast to the supposed timidity of his advisors, there is likely some truth behind it. The Hyksos had introduced new technologies to Egypt, facilitated expansive Mediterranean trade, and managed the country with administrative skill equal to that of native rulers. A strategy of peaceful coexistence might have seemed the easiest path forward. But such a path held no appeal for Kamose or the 17th Dynasty, who sought to restore Egypt's former greatness. For a proud Theban, the presence of foreign rulers on Egyptian soil was intolerable. Kamose made his intentions unequivocally clear to his inner circle: "My desire is to reclaim Egypt." Yet before that vision could be realized, Egypt had to contend with two pressing challenges: the lingering Hyksos occupation and the rising threat from Kush. The Kushite ruler had built a powerful army, complete with a strong cavalry, and showed every intent to expand his territory. The earlier raids on Nekheb had taught the Thebans a critical lesson: they needed to secure their southern border before launching any offensive in the north. Facing a numerically superior Hyksos army equipped with better technology, Egypt could not afford to fight on two fronts. The Kushite danger had to be addressed first. Thus, in 1540 BC, in only the second year of his reign and following extensive preparations, Kamose led his troops south. Their mission was clear: retake Wawat and shield it from further incursions, creating a secure buffer zone to the south. As the army advanced through the lightly populated Nile Valley beyond Abu, they met little, if any, resistance. When they reached the base of the Second Cataract, their target came into sight, the fortress of Buhan. Once a vital military hub during the Middle Kingdom, Buhan had easily fallen into Kushite hands in the intervening years. Its Egyptian garrison had quickly adapted, serving their new Nubian rulers as faithfully as they had served previous pharaohs. However, upon seeing Kamose's army approach in force, the occupants of the fort seemed to change allegiance once again without mounting a defense. Greeted as a liberator, Kamose took charge of reinforcing Buhan's defenses and restoring it as a key southern stronghold. As a capable strategist, Kamose's foresight extended beyond the immediate task of defense. With an eye on Egypt's long-term presence in Nubia, he took steps to re-establish centralized control in the region. Relying on the uncertain loyalty of fortress commanders was a risk no wise king would take. Instead, Kamose introduced a new system of governance that would shape Egypt's administration of Nubia for centuries. He appointed a trusted official named Teti as the first king's son of Kush, a viceroy who would represent the pharaoh in all Nubian affairs and report directly to him. With Teti securely positioned at the administrative center in Phares, Kamose returned north to prepare for a much more dangerous confrontation. His approach to the northern front combined psychological warfare with military action. Kamose believed that a campaign of fear and destruction targeting Hyksos-aligned towns in Middle Egypt would shake enemy morale and pave the way for a final offensive. As he declared, "I sailed downstream as a victor to expel the Asiatics, following the will of Ammonius, my courageous army before me, like a storm of fire." His first objective was the town of Nefrusi, situated within Hyksos-controlled territory just north of Kmun, modern El Ashmunian. The town was under the governance of an Egyptian named Teti, son of Pepi. By striking hard and publicly punishing this collaborator, Kamose hoped to send a clear message that would encourage others to defect to the Egyptian side. Under the cover of night, Kamose's forces advanced and launched a dawn assault. I descended upon him like a hawk. My troops were like lions carrying off their prey. The attack was merciless. After plundering the town, Kamose ordered it to be completely destroyed. In the following days, the settlements of Hardai and Prashak met a similar fate. With numerous towns in Middle Egypt reduced to rubble, Hyksos' dominance in the region was shattered. Thebes was advancing, both in territory and momentum. Then, by chance, a valuable opportunity presented itself. Drawing on Thebes' deep familiarity with desert terrain, developed during earlier conflicts, Kamose maintained regular patrols along the desert routes. These surveillance units monitored activity, watching for suspicious movements and gathering intelligence. The Hyksos, too, depended on these routes for trade with Kush. Though Thebes was officially under Hyksos control, sending goods through rebel territory along the Nile was too great a risk. Instead, the route between Seko, modern Elkes, and Kerma, the Kushite capital, ran through the western desert oases and was heavily traveled by caravans and diplomatic envoys. One such envoy was intercepted by Kamose's scouts near the oasis of Jesjes, modern Bahariya. To their astonishment, the messenger was found carrying a letter from the Hyksos ruler to the new king of Kush. Its contents were staggering. From the ruler of Hutweret, Usera Apipi, greetings to the son of the king of Kush. Why have you taken the throne without notifying me? Have you seen what Egypt has done to me? The king there, Kamose, has invaded my territory without provocation, attacking both my lands and yours. He has ravaged them both. Come north, do not hesitate. He is within my reach. No one in Egypt will resist you. I will not allow him to pass until you arrive. Then, we shall divide the cities of Egypt between us. Despite expressing frustration over not being informed of the Kushite succession, Apipi extended a bold proposal to his southern ally. If the Kushites joined him in a military campaign, he would share control of Egypt. It was a textbook case of divide and conquer. For the Thebans, the intercepted letter confirmed their greatest fear. Kamose reacted swiftly and instinctively. Rather than executing the unlucky messenger, he chose to send him back to Hutweret with a message of his own directed at Apipi. I will not leave you in peace. I will not allow you to walk the earth without my pursuit. To reinforce this threat, Kamose ordered the messenger to report the recent Theban victories in Middle Egypt, highlighting not only the bravery and resolve of his army but their ability to strike deep into Hyksos-controlled territory. Apipi's appeal for Kushite assistance had exposed a critical vulnerability. Suddenly, the idea of a Theban offensive against Hutweret itself no longer seemed far-fetched. If Kamose's first-hand account of the campaign is to be trusted, he did in fact press his attack all the way to the Hyksos capital. He boasted of reaching the outskirts of Hutweret, indulging in wine from Apipi's vineyards, felling his trees, violating his women, and seizing cargo ships filled with luxury goods imported from the Near East: gold, lapis lazuli, silver, turquoise, countless bronze axes, morina oil, incense, fat, honey, willow, and boxwood. He claimed he had approached close enough to see the royal fortress where Hyksos women, terrified, peered over the walls like baby mice hiding in their holes. Kamose organized his navy into formation and launched a bold assault on the Hyksos stronghold. However, the attack did not succeed. Despite the setback, Kamose returned to Thebes presenting himself as a triumphant warrior, leading his army home in victory. True to pharaonic tradition, he commissioned a series of monumental stelae to be erected in the temple of Ammonius at Ipitsut, proclaiming his military feats to future generations. But the celebrations were cut short by his sudden death just a few months later, in 1539. The exact cause remains unknown. Despite his courage and determination, Kamose did not receive the burial of a triumphant hero. He was laid to rest in a simple, unadorned coffin, accompanied only by 2 daggers. Kamose's passing was a heavy blow to Egypt. The sense of grief was likely compounded by uncertainty surrounding the royal succession. Only 3 years earlier, Kamose had probably been chosen over the rightful heir because he was old enough to continue the fight that had taken the life of Seqenenra. With Kamose now gone, the throne could no longer bypass the designated successor. Egypt entered a period of uneasy waiting. 10 long years passed as Thebes prepared for the young Prince Ahmose to reach maturity. During this time, Egypt maintained control over Buhan, keeping the Kushite threat in check. Meanwhile, Apipi's weakened forces were in no condition to strike. But without a leader of their own, the Thebans could not take the initiative either. All they could do was hold their position and prepare for the battles yet to come.